It's the middle of the night in Taipei. The city is asleep, unaware of what's coming. Then, without warning, sirens blare. Explosions echo through the streets. The island's air defenses light up the night sky, desperately trying to stop a flood of incoming missiles. People scramble for shelter, their worst fears unfolding in real time. China has launched a full-scale invasion of Taiwan, and the world is about to change forever. For decades, China has claimed Taiwan as a breakaway province that must be reunited with the mainland, by force if necessary. But Taiwan isn't just any island. It's a thriving democracy, a technological powerhouse, and a key player in global supply chains. If China invades, the consequences wouldn't be limited to Taiwan alone. It would ignite a crisis unlike anything the modern world has seen. The war begins. A Chinese invasion of Taiwan would be swift and brutal. The first phase of the assault would begin with cyber attacks, disrupting Taiwan's military and communications networks. Simultaneously, missile strikes would target radar stations, power grids, and major transportation hubs. Taiwan's Air Force would scramble to respond, but against the sheer scale of China's military might, their resources would be quickly overwhelmed. Within hours, the People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, would deploy aircraft carriers, amphibious assault ships, and thousands of troops. Paratroopers would land in key cities, securing government buildings and strategic infrastructure. Meanwhile, Chinese special forces would infiltrate Taipei, targeting high-ranking officials and military leaders. The goal? To decapitate Taiwan's leadership before they can organize a coordinated defense. Despite these overwhelming odds, Taiwan wouldn't go down without a fight. The island has been preparing for this scenario for decades. Its military would launch counterattacks, using anti-ship missiles to target China's naval fleet and deploying highly mobile ground units to disrupt enemy advances. Taiwan's mountainous terrain would work to its advantage, forcing Chinese forces into prolonged, grueling urban warfare. The global response. As the invasion unfolds, the world watches in shock. The United States, bound by its commitments under the Taiwan Relations Act, faces a defining moment. While the U.S. has never explicitly promised military intervention, the idea of letting Taiwan fall without a fight would be a strategic and political disaster. Within hours, American carrier strike groups move into the Pacific. Japan and Australia, fearing the implications for regional security, pledge military support. NATO allies, though geographically distant, prepare economic sanctions against China. Beijing, anticipating this response, issues a chilling warning. Any foreign interference will be met with decisive military action. The risk of escalation is immediate. Skirmishes erupt between Chinese and U.S. forces in the South China Sea. Cyber warfare intensifies, with both sides targeting financial institutions, infrastructure, and military communications. But it's not just governments that react. Global markets spiral into chaos. The stock market plunges. Oil prices skyrocket. Companies that rely on Taiwan's semiconductor industry, like Apple, Intel, and Samsung, see their supply chains crippled overnight. The modern world, dependent on advanced microchips produced in Taiwan, faces an unprecedented technological blackout. Economic fallout. The collapse of Taiwan's semiconductor industry sends shockwaves through the global economy. Nearly 60% of the world's advanced semiconductors come from Taiwan. Without these chips, everything from smartphones to medical equipment to military hardware is affected. Companies are forced to shut down factories, leading to mass layoffs. Inflation skyrockets as supply chain disruptions send prices soaring. Meanwhile, China faces its own economic turmoil. Western nations impose crippling sanctions. Major companies pull out of China, leading to job losses and social unrest. The Chinese yuan tumbles and foreign investments vanish. Even China's closest allies begin to question whether the cost of war is worth the global backlash, the threat of world war. With tensions at an all-time high, the possibility of a larger global conflict looms. The U.S. increases its military presence in the Pacific, while China doubles down on its territorial claims in the South China Sea. Russia, already locked in conflicts of its own, seizes the moment to escalate tensions with NATO in Eastern Europe. North Korea, seeing an opportunity to advance its own interests, launches provocations against South Korea. The world inches closer to a global war. Diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the situation struggle to gain traction. The United Nations holds emergency meetings, but divisions among world powers prevent any unified action. Protesters flood the streets in cities around the world, demanding an end to the conflict, but the momentum of war is difficult to stop once it has begun. The human cost. Beyond the geopolitical and economic consequences, the human toll of this war would be staggering. Civilians in Taiwan would bear the brunt of the invasion. Entire cities would be reduced to rubble. Millions would flee their homes, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. The world would face the largest refugee crisis since World War II. In China, dissent would be met with severe crackdowns. Any opposition to the war would be swiftly silenced. Families would be torn apart as young men are conscripted into the military. The economic downturn would push millions into poverty, fueling further unrest. As the war drags on, the risk of nuclear confrontation grows. The US and China both possess vast nuclear arsenals, and with tensions escalating, the possibility of a catastrophic miscalculation becomes frighteningly real. A single mistake, a single provocation could lead to the unthinkable. Can war be avoided? Despite the terrifying scenario, war is not inevitable. Diplomacy, deterrence, and economic interdependence have so far kept China from making a move on Taiwan. The global community must continue to push for peaceful resolutions, strengthening alliances, promoting dialogue, and reinforcing Taiwan's defenses to make the cost of invasion too high for China to bear. The stakes couldn't be higher. If conflict erupts, the world as we know it could change forever. But if world leaders and global citizens push for peace, there's still hope that this scenario remains nothing more than a chilling hypothetical. So what would you do if this became reality? Are you prepared for the consequences of a war that could reshape the world? Let's hope we never have to find out.